Hello, your dear friends, and welcome to this beautiful program that we're broadcasting live on the Bethesda Spiritual Healing YouTube page and Divine Light Spirituals Group YouTube page. And we're also broadcasting this program every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to the Divine Light Facebook page. We are greeting you all with an open heart, and today we will continue in our weekly study. And you will ask, what are we actually studying? Well, we are focusing on the Spirit's teachings, which we find in the Gospel according to Spiritism. You may be surprised, but the book is organized in the way that Allan Kardec brings to us many different chapters with different subject matters. And then at the end of his exposés are the Spirit's teachings in every single chapter. And so far, we've covered the Spirit's teachings, which is what we focus on in this study. We've completed chapter 4 last week, and tonight we will be focusing on the beginning of chapter 5. Chapter 5 is the longest chapter in the Gospel, and it is a wonderful one because it deals with our afflictions. Now, we know that all of us are dealing at times more, sometimes less, with afflictions. This planet is still a planet of atonement, which means we're here to undo past wrongs and hopefully plant beautiful, nourishing seeds for our future. So this chapter 5, is entitled "Blessed are the Afflicted." Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be comforted, and that is our daily prayer. What we will do is we will summarize ever so briefly the various little chapters that Allan Kardec speaks to, and then we will be focusing on 3 different spirit teachings that are accompanying Allan Kardec's teachings. Of course, we won't do this chapter any justice here in this program, so you're invited to pick it up, and since we're not rushing through it but doing it in little sections, you're invited to pick up the book and read through it yourself to familiarize yourselves one more time. We can never do it enough, right, dear friends? Hi, Tony. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for joining, dear friends. All right, so let us begin. Blessed are the afflicted. So at first, Allan Kardec speaks to the justice of afflictions. And of course, that's super important because some of us may think, oh, the neighbor is never suffering, but my life is so super difficult. Well, what we need to keep in mind is that God is wholly just and good. God is supremely just and good, is the first cause of all things, the supreme intelligence. So God does not make any mistakes. And God so-called rules through the divine laws. And the law is, main law that's dealing with afflictions is the law of cause and effect. So is our suffering, are our afflictions always just? And the answer is yes, they have to be. Why? Because God is supremely just. God doesn't make any mistakes. So if God is wholly just and good, then the vicissitudes of life must have a just cause. And that just cause must have a just effect. It's just logical. So everything is right on. And who causes the afflictions? Well, it's us. There's no one else to blame. Then Allan Kardec moves on to talk about the current causes of afflictions. So when we look at that, then we see that there are vicissitudes in our lives that we can actually sometimes trace back to things we've said, done, not said, thought, felt. Those are the current causes of afflictions. In other words, they refer to our current lifetime. We need to remember again the law of cause and effect, and that we are, simply put, the heirs of ourselves. Yes, we are the heirs of ourselves. Now, we didn't coin this term, but André Louise says that in the book Between Heaven and Earth in chapter 29. And that is really important for us to really download. We are the heirs of ourselves, which means the afflictions that we incur, the cause lies within us. And they can lie in this lifetime, but also in a previous lifetime, which is the next chapter that Allan Kardec speaks to, and that is entitled Prior Causes of Afflictions. Prior is pertaining to before this current lifetime. He reminds us that we have many lives, reincarnation is a real thing, and that not all trials stem from this lifetime. Sometimes we just don't know why we're suffering from a certain illness, let's say. And we can't really see, we've lived healthily, we feel we've done our very best to do the good in this lifetime, and still we're diagnosed with a very serious illness. Well, in that case, Allan Kardec reminds us to look beyond this lifetime and not to get stuck in a myopic view. But he also reminds us that not all vicissitudes, not all afflictions actually stem from a specific wrong. Because sometimes we may have chosen an affliction just to accelerate our progress. So let us remember that too. Then he speaks to the forgetfulness of the past. Well, some of us, and sometimes we just wish we'd known what we have done in the past and who we were. But God doesn't agree with us. God gave us actually a gift of putting a veil over our memory. And Allan Kardec reminds us that this forgetfulness of our past is actually only while we're dwelling in this physical form, during our corporeal lives. Once we discarnate, we have the bigger picture again, and we even also will review our past lifetime. And we just learned again in André Louise's book, Between Heaven and Earth, that the embryo is actually going through the same process. Very interesting. So on both ends of our incarnation, we have that experience. So it's a gift from God that we forget our past. However, we have pointers, and the pointers are our instinctive tendencies. So if we go into the habit of observing ourselves, also through the nightly review, we pretty much get a pretty good idea of who we were, because there's certain impulses we still have, and we know they may not necessarily come from this lifetime. Then he moves on to reasons for resigning oneself to the vicissitudes of life. And there he says, well, you ought to consider yourselves lucky that you are allowed to be afflicted, because affliction means that God deems you ready and prepared and equipped to deal with a subject matter of something that we may have done wrong, unless we chose it only for reasons of progress. But let us stick for a moment the fact that this is atonement. There, Allan Kardec says that God is basically saying, patting us on the back, you're ready now, you can work on this. So let us embrace our afflictions. That is the invitation, to not blame fate, not to blame anyone, not to blame. There is no blame, because we are the heirs of our own selves. Law of cause and effect, right? So the reasons for resigning ourselves is now we're deemed ready to undo some past wrong, for example. Then lastly, he speaks to suicide and calls it a form of insanity. And the reason why he's saying that is because he says the person who despairs and takes their lives, his or her life, is somebody who is stuck very much in the materialistic viewpoint. Because if we only see this lifetime, if we only see what we can touch, then we can easily despair. We don't get the bigger picture. We have no idea or no recognition of the law of cause and effect. And the most beautiful fact that we are heirs of ourselves. No, when we blame, then life can feel very unjust. When we don't remember or don't know that God is wholly just, that is when we are temporarily taken over by the insanity of materialism, and we may take our lives. And what we need to learn then, or what we always need to practice, is patience, is resignation. Resignation, Allan Kardec defines in the Gospel according to Spiritism in this chapter, as well as the surrender of the heart. And that we can do best when we see the bigger picture. Patience is definitely a virtue. Now, let us focus now on the Spirit's teachings. So the first Spirit that we will look at is called, just a second here, Lacordaire. Lacordaire spoke in 1863 in France, in Le Havre, and the chapter is entitled To Suffer Well or Badly. Now, it's not only that we are invited to embrace our suffering and our afflictions, but we can even do it well or badly. For this, we will be sharing our screen. Let us do that. Let's also check the technology to make sure that we actually are on target here. Okay, gonna do a quick check. Thank you for your patience. We're using this virtue and we're applying it right away. Patience of seeing whether technology is cooperative. Okay, let's see here. We're not sure that this is actually happening. Nope. It's not it. Okay. Yep. So let's see whether this is transporting forward. It seems to work, dear friends. Yay. We like that. We like when things work. Okay, good. Perfect. All right. So this particular slide is just summarizing the headlines of the chapters that Allan Kardec speaks to in chapter 5 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, which is entitled Blessed Are the Afflicted. So we've covered this already. And now we're moving on to Lacordaire. That's item 18, To Suffer Well or Badly. Again, you're invited to read it on your own later on at some point, because we're not going to read the whole chapter. So when Christ said, "Blessed are the afflicted, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven," he was not referring to those who suffer in general, since everyone on the earth suffers. Everyone on the earth suffers, whether upon the throne or upon straw. Right here, Lacordaire is starting off by consoling us. We're in good company. Everyone on this planet is suffering in one form or another. There is no one who doesn't. And if it appears to be that somebody isn't, that's not true. But at the same time, hopefully we won't compare anyway. Because the minute we start comparing and judging books by their cover, we're setting ourselves up for more suffering. Right, friends? So, but alas, few suffer well. And this is our subject matter. Now, how do we suffer well? Let's see. Few understand that only trials that are borne well can lead them to the kingdom of God. Only trials that are borne well can lead them to the kingdom of God that Jesus promised to us. Discouragement is a fault, he says. Discouragement is a fault. God refuses you consolation because you lack courage. Courage is linked to the word cur, which is the heart. Heart. We take heart. We're courageous. Prayer is a support for the soul, but it is not enough. He says it must be based on what? Prayer, courage, must be based on what? What do you think? Well, he says, on a living faith in God's goodness. So we are invited, in order to suffer well, we're invited to be courageous, because courage leads to consolation. And we're invited to pray. But prayer that is linked to a living faith, that's like an active faith, that's seeing the good in everything, that's knowing that we are the heirs of our own selves. It's knowing that there's reincarnation, the law of cause and effect, and the whole 9 yards. We know that God is good. There's nothing to be but doubtful about. So if we suffer, there's a very good reason. And as we heard earlier, actually, it's a reason to be grateful for. It must be based on a living faith. He says, the burden is proportional to the strength, just as the reward will be proportional to the resignation and courage. So we will be so-called rewarded, and the reward will be in mastering lessons. And we will be drawing closer to God, and we will be working more diligently on the kingdom of heaven in our souls, in our hearts. So the burden that we receive is proportional to our strength. Right there is a great reminder to never look to the neighbor, because if they have a life with very little affliction, that may just simply mean that they're not strong enough yet to take the burden that we may be already capable of carrying, right? So it's so helpful to see the bigger picture, because then it always goes back to gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. I'm actually strong enough. Thank you for allowing me to undo past wrongs. What a beautiful way of seeing afflictions. The reward will be greater than the affliction is painful, and that points towards the future. It's a promise. However, one must merit that reward, and that is why life is full of tribulations, because there's no free lunch. We got to work for it, right? So everything is based on merit. Be content when God sends you into battle. Be content when God sends you into battle. So next time life is pinching us, when we feel pinched, let us remember a few things. Let us remember that we are the heirs of our own selves. Let us remember the law of cause and effect. Let us remember courage. And let us remember prayer. And let us remember faith, that God is all goodness and absolutely just. When a reason for trouble or vexation touches you, try to lift yourselves above it. Let's try to lift ourselves above it. And when you have managed to control the impulses of impatience, anger, or despair, say to yourselves with just satisfaction, I was the stronger. I was the stronger. Then he completes, blessed are the afflicted, may be translated thusly. Now let us listen. How does Laodicea translate blessed are the afflicted for us? And we know it's going to help us to embrace our afflictions more joyfully even. Blessed are those who have the opportunity to test their faith, firmness, perseverance, and submission to God's will. For they will receive 100 times the joy they lacked on earth. And after labor will always come repose. Apologize, friends. So, we are invited to test our faith when affliction knocks on our doors. We are invited to practice our firmness, to rise ourselves above the affliction, our perseverance, our submission to God's will. And what is the most important ingredient to submit to God's will? Humility. Because if we can't be humble, we can't surrender to God's will. Then we are in charge. And then all of a sudden, everything becomes unjust. For we will receive 100 times the joy we lacked on earth. 100 times if we stick it through, if we embrace our afflictions. When we practice, when we strengthen our faith, because we know God is nothing but goodness. And after labor will come repose. Thank you, Lacordaire. What a beautiful message, helping us to suffer well. And of course, the opposite would be badly, which a lot of us do here on planet Earth. We have enough models of that. So let us focus on the positive. So only trials born well can lead to the kingdom of God. And we've just heard that we will receive joy 100 times more than our suffering was. We need courage because that leads to consolation. Prayer and living faith must be based on God's goodness, benevolence. The burden will always be proportional to our strength. So it's a good thing. The reward will be proportional to our resignation and our courage. And the reward will be greater than the affliction is painful. Isn't it beautiful? So much positivity and never any discouragement. All right, dear friends, let us move on. The next message is by our beloved St. Augustine. Let's double check this. Yes, St. Augustine. He entitles his message Evil and Its Remedy. So let us see what he has to say. Let's see. Evil and Its Remedy. Actually, it says Lacordaire, but it's actually St. Augustine. Is your earth then a place of joy, a paradise of delights? He's asking. How would we answer that? Is our earth a place of joy, a paradise of delight? Well, we would say yes, if we really take Lacordaire's message to heart. If we really practice Lacordaire's message and suffer well, then we can only see joy in everything, and even in the most difficult moments. But are we there yet? Maybe not quite, right? You who have gone to live on earth must expect burning tears and bitter suffering. But no matter how acute and deep your suffering may be, look up to heaven and bless the Lord for having willed to test you, O people. Do you acknowledge power of your master only when he has healed the sores of your body and crowned your days with beatitude and joy? Good question, right? Do we only thank God? Do we only acknowledge the power of God when we receive beatitudes, healing, money, fame, beauty, family, all the easy to accept things? Or are we praising God also when things are a little more rough? Well, the invitation for us is to expand into that. Do you acknowledge God's love only when He has adorned your body with all sorts of glories and has restored its brilliance and purity? Are we? That's our therapeutic question for right now. Do we have a tendency to be like that? Most of us do. But tonight we're invited to rewrite the script and to expand our gratitude into everything. And why would we want to do that? Because A, we know God is just. B, we know it's only in our best interest. And the reward will be glorious. So here we are. Yes, on earth is suffering. But we are here on planet Earth, invited to learn to embrace the afflictions with a positive attitude. Even if you had to weep and suffer an entire lifetime, what would that be when compared to the eternal glory reserved for those who have endured their trials with faith, love, and resignation? Even if you had to weep and suffer an entire lifetime. Can we even imagine that? Our lives are a lot easier, right? We have not had to weep and suffer an entire lifetime, which may mean we're not strong enough for that yet, right? What would that be when compared to the eternal glory reserved for those who have endured their trials with faith, with love and resignation? Interestingly enough, this lesson by St. Augustine is very similar to Lacordaire. It's basically no difference, right? Because he's also asking us for resignation, for faith, for love. You who suffer the most, consider yourselves the blessed of this earth. One more time. We are invited to see the blessings in our suffering. And he goes so far as to say that we are the blessed of this earth. Those who suffer the most are the blessed of the earth. Thank you, St. Augustine. Wonderful. It really is helpful. It is the balm that we need on this planet. And we just wish everyone could read and listen to this, could read this, listen to this, study this, and practice it. In your state as discarnates, he continues on to say, when you were gliding through space, you yourselves chose your trial because you believed you were strong enough to bear it. So why complain now? Cognitive dissonance. But this one we can explain because we know that the veil of forgetfulness comes over us. So while we are discarnates, we're all determined, yes, we're going to do this, that, and the other. We're going to suffer from this, that, and the other. We see it so clearly in the book, Memoirs of Suicide, where these handful of discarnates who committed suicide and going through such a hard time on the other side, eventually come around to saying, okay, I'm ready to go back to planet Earth and to undo my past wrong of committing suicide. And I'm ready to have a body that's not functioning right. And the whole list of other things, that deprivations they will go through. And they're excited. They want to go through this because they see the bigger picture. They see the beauty and the blessing in it. But you and I, we're here on this side. We forgot. And every time there's a boo-boo in our lives, we start screaming like little children. Tonight, we're reminded one more time, why complain now? We chose our trials because we believed we were strong enough to bear them. So let us be strong enough, friends. We have so many tools thanks to Spiritism. And even if we just keep rereading and studying the gospel for the rest of our lives, it will remind us of the strength we actually have within ourselves. So then he continues. What remedy, therefore, is recommended for those who are attacked by cruel obsessions and excruciating ills? Only one is infallible. And what is it? What is the one remedy that's infallible when we are suffering from cruel obsessions and excruciating ills? One more time. Faith. Yes, faith. Faith is the key to healing. Faith. Why can we have faith in God? Because He is just and merciful. There are no mistakes. Faith, turning your gaze towards heaven with faith. Faith is the sure remedy for suffering. Faith is the sure remedy for suffering. It always points to the horizons of the infinite. And it does, right? It shows us a perspective that this lifetime, this moment of suffering is so minuscule compared to the immortality of our soul, our immortal timeline. Faith is the sure remedy for suffering. It always points to the horizons of the infinite. Therefore, do not ask us what remedy should be employed to remedy this ulcer or that sore, this temptation or that trial. Interesting. St. Augustine tells us we have the remedy already. Why are we running here, there, and everywhere? Why do we keep asking for more remedies when we have all the remedies already? What a beautiful reminder, friends. We have all the tools we need. But what we're lacking is remembering to use them and to have faith in them and to have faith in God. So here he says, do not ask us what remedy should be employed to remedy this ulcer or that sore, this temptation or that trial. Remember that those who believe are strengthened by the remedy of faith, and those who doubt its effectiveness, even for 1 second, are immediately punished. Now, the word punished is a little old-fashioned. It kind of smells of a punishing God, but God isn't punishing. So let us replace it like there will be a consequence. Law of cause and effect. That if we don't have faith and we doubt God, at that moment we're putting a seed into our garden of eternity that will yield a star thistle or something thorny that will scratch us. That is the so-called punishment. It's the effect of putting an unnourishing, scratchy seed in the ground. That is really what's meant by the so-called punishment. It's a consequence of our wrong thinking. So the remedy of faith, we are invited to never doubt its effectiveness, even for 1 second. Hold on, let's see. The Lord has set his seal upon all those who believe in him. Christ told you that with faith you can move mountains, and the mountains are also our afflictions. And I say to you that those who suffer and have faith as a support will be placed under his watch care and will suffer no more. The moments of greatest pain will be for them the first happy notes of eternal joy. Their soul will disengage itself from the body in such a way that while the body is still writhing in convulsions, it will be gliding through the heavenly regions, singing with the angels hymns of thanksgiving and glory to the Lord. So now he's even promising an easier discarnation. Our soul will already be united with the good spirits, singing with the angels, because we've completed our trials well, as Lacordaire taught us of how to suffer well. And faith was the main ingredient coming from Lacordaire, as well as St. Augustine. And St. Augustine wraps up this beautiful message that's boosting our resilience, we want to say, by saying, happy are they who suffer and weep. May their souls rejoice, for God will fill them with blessings. And I'm sure you and I can attest it from our own lives. The hardest moments always yielded the most joyful transformations. Yes, and we can take strength from that too by looking back on our lifetimes and maybe other people's lives even too. Faith moves mountains. We're in good hands, dear friends. We don't have to worry for 1 second. All we need to do is remember our toolbox, take out the tools, and use them. And there's not that many tools. There's certain tools, they work for everything. And one of them is faith. So let us be happy when we suffer and weep. All right, so one last spirit message. This one is entitled, Happiness is Not of This World. It is item 20, chapter 5, Blessed Are the Afflicted. And it is by François-Nicolas Madeleine, and he came through in 1863. Let's see what he has to say. Happiness is not of this world. I'm not happy. Happiness was made for me. People of every social position generally exclaim. It's true. We look around on planet Earth, and we may have been the same way. We say, I'm not happy. I want this, that, and the other. Because we forget about what we just learned. Again, the tools we have, the bigger picture. Then he says, this, my dear children, proves better than any possible reason the truth of the maxim from Ecclesiastes. And what did Ecclesiastes say? Happiness is not of this world, but only if we don't see the bigger picture, right? Because now we know better. Indeed, neither wealth nor power, even the flower of youth, are the essential conditions for happiness. No. Wealth, power, youth are not the essential conditions for happiness. I would say more, not even the combining of these three much desired conditions are, since we constantly hear persons of all ages amongst the most privileged classes bitterly complaining about their situation. Complaints, doesn't matter where we're from, who we are, how old we are, how we look, how much we have. We're master complainers. And as he says, all the material desires, attributes that we think will make us happy, once we have them, are we any different? No. For a moment, we're excited, but we all know it wears off so quickly, doesn't it? Because it's not true happiness. And François-Nicolas Madeleine reminds us of that. That's not where our focus should lie. So then, he says, those who preach that the earth is humans' only home and that it is only there and in only one lifetime that they are permitted to reach the highest degree of happiness that their nature will allow, are deluding themselves and are deceiving those who listen to them. Since it has been demonstrated through many centuries of experience that this globe entails only in exceptional cases the conditions needed for an individual's complete happiness. So he's telling us that here on planet Earth, we're all prone to be unhappy and placing our bets on the material accomplishments. And that only in very exceptional cases we will find individuals who are completely happy. And these individuals are not necessarily who are young, rich, and famous, beautiful, and have a lot of money. Why is that? Because the happiness comes from a different place. It comes actually more so from the place of suffering well. If we follow the steps that Lacordaire and St. Augustine has given us, we are in happier hands. Francois continues, consequently, if the earthly dwelling place is meant for trial and expiations, one must accept the fact that there are more favorable homes elsewhere, where the human spirit, although still imprisoned in physical flesh, possesses the fullness of the joys connected with human life. Francois reminds us that we can't just see this one lifetime and only planet Earth as the only inhabited planet. There too, our vision needs to be larger. And right at that very moment, it will become easier for us to suffer because we will know that this is just a transitory moment. If we only see one lifetime on planet Earth, wow, can we just for a moment try that on for size? How desperate that must feel? How we then compare because one person has this and I don't. This person doesn't suffer and I do. All of a sudden, there is no God, or God is unjust and needs to be blamed. Now I need to steal and lie in order to get to something that I think I deserve. That is how many of us live here on planet Earth. But we just got reminded of how we will do it correctly. And that is the beauty. That's the consolation. That's the balm. And the number one step is our faith in the goodness of God. Nevertheless, do not deduce from my words that the earth is dedicated forever to the fate of being a penitentiary. Not only we will move on, but also the planet itself is transitioning. And we know that we are currently in the phase of Earth's transition from a planet of atonement to a planet of regeneration. And transitions are often messy. So we can help the transition by working on our own inner transformation even more diligently, staying very positive and following the teachings of Jesus and these spirits, Allan Kardec, healing doctors, mentors, everything that Spiritism and of course other ways help us through with. So let us see what else he says here. Certainly not. So he says, nevertheless, do not deduce from my words that the earth is dedicated forever to be a penitentiary. Certainly not, because from the progress already accomplished, you can easily infer future progress. And from the social improvements that have been gained, new and more fertile improvements will arise. Such is the immense task that must be accomplished by the new doctrine that the spirits have revealed to you. So then, my dear children, he says, You must all dedicate yourselves to spreading Spiritism that has already begun your own regeneration. Isn't that the truth? Haven't we all already transformed and regenerated thanks to the doctrine? It is your duty, he says, to enable your brothers and sisters to share in the rays of the sacred light. It is our duty, our duty. It's our duty to share the rays of the sacred light. We're invited to spread Spiritism. Why Spiritism? Because it is a consoling message. The Consoler came 2,000 some years ago. And the Consoler promised that he would come back through the Spirit's teachings. And yes, the teachings are ever so consoling and helpful. They give us each a beautifully shiny toolbox with effective tools in that hopefully every morning will shine, we buff up, look at them, remember them, and then use them every single breath of the way, every thought at a time. It will make our lives easier and will help with our regeneration. Therefore, get to work, my beloved children. Let us get to work. Within this solemn assembly, may all your hearts aspire to the great objective of preparing for future generations a world on which happiness is no longer a meaningless word. So we are invited to be part of the change, to be the change we want to see. It hinges on each and every single one of us on planet Earth to help this planet to transition. So let us get to work, he says, because it is our duty to help the future generations to co-create a world where happiness reigns. And we know how to do it. Ingredient number 1 is faith. Dear friends, this completes our study for tonight. Let us connect. Let us see. Yes. Hi, Nora. Thank you so much for joining, dear friend. Yes. Technology is cooperating. Thank you so much. All technology seems to be working. Yes. Thank you so much. Dear friends, so much gratitude. We have so much gratitude for these beautiful teachings to focus on the goodness of God and each and every one of us, because we all are in this together. And it's only through fraternity and collaboration that we transmute ourselves and regenerate ourselves using the tools that God, Jesus, and the good spirits have given us together to create a happier world by starting to suffer well, seeing the bigger picture, and always having faith. Thank you, dear friends, for joining. Next week, we will continue with chapter 5. More spirit teachings. There is plenty there. I think there's 13 in this chapter. And we will see what other tools will be buffed next week for us to have a successful, happy, joyful, faithful reincarnation. Much love, dear friends. So God willing, we'll see you next week, same time, same place.